Hi everyone, and thanks for joining. It's good to see people here. Very excited. This is the first live stream that we're doing on YouTube, which I was just talking about, and I'm grateful to the tech gods who have allowed me to connect today and make it all work for this session. I'm really excited about this session because I know it's going to be practical, I know it's going to be useful, and I know it's going to be engaging, and it's things that we've been talking about for a long time, that importance of getting that message across as an artist about who you are, why people should be interested in you and your music. So I'm joined today, as you can see, it's not just going to be me talking, but we have Lisa Durrant from Just the Type, who is, I love this, Lisa, because I got this from your webpage, but the storyteller and arranger of words. I absolutely love that. But Lisa works with musicians, labels, managers, publicists to write bios and press releases for musicians. And you've been doing that for a while, haven't you, Lisa?
Yes. Just the Type, I think, well, yeah, it was we turned eight sort of in January. So it's been going a few years now, which is good. And basically work with artists that are just starting out, doing things themselves, not signed to a label or anything, right through to artists that have a few albums under their belt and have been going for a few years and might be on a more established. So and like all around the world as well. So yeah, it's very varied and different and exciting. So yeah.
And what's your what's your sort of, I always like to know this about people, like what's your sort of origin story? What brought you to doing this?
What brought me here? I suppose it's like a lot of people in the music industry, really, that you kind of fall into something and then find that that's the thing you're passionate about and you want to kind of keep doing. So I guess sort of Just the Type, it really started because at the time I was working with a PR agency, so I'm representing a lot of different artists as a press officer. So I was liaising with magazines, websites to try and get press coverage for those artists, basically. But decided that I wanted to do something a bit more creative, and I'd always been a writer as well, so kind of spent a lot more time doing writing and looking after writing press releases, biographies, that kind of thing for artists. And I started to come across a lot of artists were saying to me the same thing all the time. So especially people starting out, that they'd spent months or years working on creating all this amazing music, but it just wasn't being heard on the radio, or no one was writing about it, and they weren't getting the attention that they wanted the music to have. So having worked in PR, and I decided that actually it's something I might be able to help with. That's kind of it in a nutshell. But along the way, I've worked in management, sort of dabbled in that. I've worked at a record shop, Piccadilly Records in Manchester, just like packing up mail orders and seeing how but it was one of those things that more different aspects of the music industry ended up working in. It all kind of fit together as well. So you can kind of see how like distributors need really good media reviews of records to sell them into the record shops and then the record shops need to send them out to the customers. And at the same time, as also writing for various magazines, so I was receiving press releases from PRs and seeing what worked for me and what didn't really work, and what grabbed my attention and what didn't. And I thought that working with artists, I could kind of help them, having seen that side of it. And then it all kind of merged and worked together, and that sort of thing, really. So like I say, it wasn't just a snap decision, it's something that kind of evolved over time.
But I bet that's been really helpful, knowing all those different elements, because I always think like the industry, sometimes it can feel like puzzle pieces, and the better you know all the different elements, the better you can do, because like you said, you know what they want, and you get a better insight of that overall picture.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always say to people, one thing a lot of people say to me is, oh, well, what advice would you give to someone that's kind of wanting to promote their record and get it out there? And I just say, it's kind of listen to everything, read everything, see what is happening out there, get involved with everything, say yes, because it's amazing what opportunities come out of those sort of in those places that you wouldn't expect to kind of find them. So yeah, it's kind of definitely, it all feeds into each other, and you do, like you say, a jigsaw is a really good way of describing it, because putting it all together, you do see the bigger picture and how everything works. So even if it's something you're not directly involved in at the moment, it might be something that further down the line you end up needing that kind of knowledge and understanding of. So yeah, it works really well if you do that.
I love that. Say yes, that yes attitude. I love it. Okay, so just before we finish getting into the session, I also want to introduce you really quickly to our other guest, who I'm also very excited to have in the session, Marcus Joseph, who plays my favorite instrument and is doing some really exciting things in the jazz scene. So we're looking forward to hearing from you too. Say hi, Marcus.
Hey guys, how you doing? Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that he's here. And of course, I did the intros a bit back to front, but for those of you that don't know, I'm Kadee Campbell, and I call myself the community director at 30+1, the network for independent music managers and artists that manage themselves. I'll drop links for all of us into the comment section so you can find out more. You can hear more from Marcus and his music, you can see what else Lisa's doing, and you can catch up on the latest from 30+1. So I think without further ado, we should get into this session if you are ready, Lisa.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so how the structure, I don't know if I did this already, so sorry for the repetition, but let's go in case we haven't. So we're breaking it up into 2 sections. So we're going to kick it off with some tips and advice, and then we are going to end it with a live audit of Marcus's bio, which I hope will provide a lot of learning and practical application of the tips that we've been talking about. So yeah, it should be good.
Great. Okay. Shall I share I'll share my screen then with
yes.
I'm PowerPoint ready.
Excellent.
So let me find those buttons. Oh, Kadee, you need to.
Have I not allowed you to
No.
get me just? Okay, sorry guys, I've been trying to keep all the power. Let's see. Yes, let me make you a co-host, and that should do the trick.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I will share my screen, and hopefully you can all see that cover page now. Can you see that, guys?
We can see it, but it's not in the presentation.
That's fine. I won't do it, because when I do, then it changes everything and I can't see everything.
Okay,
so
that's fine.
As long as you can see the main slide, then that's all that really matters.
We can.
Cool. Okay, so like Kadee says, I'm going to talk through some tips on how to basically write an artist biography or a press release or something to promote what it is that you want to get across. And before I begin, one thing that a lot of people ask me is, do I even need an artist biography? And the way that I usually just say that it's your opportunity to get across what it is, what your key messages are. So it's that point before any journalists get to hear your music and put their own interpretation onto it. It's your point to basically set the story straight and tell people what it is. So I think to demonstrate that, I often, this is not a musical reference, but I really like the program Mad Men, and Don Draper is quite a wise man, and one of the things he says is, if you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. And in a musical sense, I always say that that's it's not about changing the conversation, but it's almost dictating the conversation. So for example, if you're an artist who makes their own musical instruments, and really wants to talk about that, no one's going to know about it unless you share that from the start. So having a biography is a really good opportunity to basically put across the talking points, the things that you want to be discussing, and do things on your terms before it, like you say, unleashing your music out into the world for everybody else to interpret it in the way they want to. And one of the things that I kind of, people go, well, I don't know what to write, I don't know where to begin. And it's that thing of either having nothing to write about and not knowing where to start, or it's knowing everything that you want to say, putting it all down and hoping it works. And there are kind of, just before I say I'm going to get to the tips, but there are different definitions for what things are. So sometimes people get a bit confused about what a biography and a press release is. And generally speaking, a biography would look better on, if it was like a profile page on your website, so it has more longevity. So it might be for the period of a campaign, it might be for something a bit longer even. Whereas a press release is something a little bit, it's more like an announcement. So that's how to think about it, really. So it's more of if you've got a tour coming up or something that's happening in the moment. So sometimes you might have an album coming out that you want to bring into your biography because you want to tell people about it in the long term, but you might want to talk about the release date of it, which will probably be better in a press release as you're announcing it. So there is some sort of differences and similarities between the two, but it's just good to get that kind of clear in your head. And like I say, as I'm talking through this presentation, it's going to be mostly about biographies. So creating that profile of you as an artist. And one of the ways that I think a lot of people get stuck is like that they have all this information they want to get in there. And I always say that the important thing to remember is a biography, it's not a CV. So it's not something where you necessarily talk about what you did at school or your work or your, you know, it's about personality. And the best way to remember that is all you're doing is telling a story. It sounds very simple, but a story has characters, you know, it has a plot line, it has a lot of, it's exciting, it's really interesting, and that is basically what you want your biography to do. So if it's easier, just don't think of it as a biography, just think I'm telling my story. So okay, anyway, that's a really long intro, but I'll get onto the tips now. And I'll just say that great. These tips are basically they're like I say, they're suggestions more than anything. A bit of a secret, there's no right or wrong way of writing a biography or a story. Obviously for one person it's going to be very different to somebody else, and my personal preferences are very different to maybe another publicist, but this is just for what it's worth, this is what I think. So generally when you're writing something, whatever it is, whether it is a biography or a press release or a CV, whatever it is, there are three areas that you should really consider. One is content, one is style, and one is structure. And I'll go through these tips, but each of them relates to these different areas, and I'll explain a bit more about what those are as we go through. So if we begin with content, the content of what you're writing is essentially all the nuts and bolts. So it's everything you do want to include. It might be things that you don't want to include. It could be all the facts, things that are unquestionable, but it also might be more sort of fictitious stuff where you've kind of fabricated it a little bit more. So it is really what is in it. And basically the first content tip is that you need to find your USP, and facts are filler. That's what I always say. So there is a difference between what is a fact and what is your unique selling point. So when I used to write for a lot of magazines, I get DIY artists send me press releases, and they would say things like, I'm a singer-songwriter who creates folk music from Manchester. And that's great, and there is nothing wrong with that. But actually, that probably describes half the musicians in Manchester. So it doesn't tell me anything specific about who you are as an artist. So what you really need to do is delve a little bit deeper, and it really is a case of like the detail the devil is in the detail kind of thing. So in terms of separating those out to give you a bit more of an idea, we'll focus on the USPs in a minute. The facts are the things that people tend to put in their press releases or biographies all the time. So it will be like what genres they're into, what musical styles they like, how old they are, where they're from, where they live. Like I say, those are things that don't make you stand out as an artist. What really makes you stand out are things on the left hand side, which are your unique selling points. So it's things about what drives you as an artist. What, if you like those musical styles, that's fine, but you have to say what it is about those musical styles that you've mentioned that you like. And basically, one of the ways, it's really hard to do because sometimes when you're really involved in something, you can't see the woods for the trees. You feel like you don't know what it is that makes you special because you're kind of in it all the time, just creating music, and you don't really know why, and you don't spend time picking it apart. I always think it's like, if you're in a bar and someone says, "Oh, what sort of music do you make?" You just fall onto the genres because that's the easy thing to do, when actually you could talk about the fact that your last song was inspired by your stories your grandfather used to tell you when you were a child. That would have, people would remember that a lot more than if you said, "Oh, I'm a folk musician," or that kind of thing. So it's being really specific and telling your story. And one of the ways that I say to artists that a really good way to do it is to maybe get a friend involved in this process. It's a little bit it might seem a bit awkward, but it will really help. Get them to almost interview you. So ask you about like why you do what you do, like what matters to you, what's important to you as an artist and a musician, and literally just write all the answers down on a piece of paper. So use a blank piece of paper as a brain dump, write down everything that comes to mind. It doesn't matter at this stage. And when you write everything down, you'll start to almost see all this information. So when at the beginning you're like, I didn't really know what to write, you've suddenly got a page of information that you can include. But the point is, as you're doing it as well, and if you're sharing that with someone, they might say, "Oh, well, that's more interesting than that," and eventually what you're looking for is a hook, something that's really, really like key to you and actually could be about nobody else. And that will be really important later on when you come to write your biography, basically.
I think that's a good tip, because the facts, when you were talking, I was thinking the fact stuff, maybe one of the reasons people throw it in is because it's easy. It's like, it's this, I'm this, I'm that. It's really easy, but you have to go through a bit of work to think about what drives you, what inspires you. You've got to dig a little bit, and maybe working with someone else is a really good way to do that. But actually, even while you're talking, I was just thinking, this is just a really good process in general, whether an artist is writing a bio or not, to go through, because it's really important to understand these USPs, because that's it's the root of the way you market yourself in your bio, but beyond that as well.
Absolutely. It's like, even if you're not writing anything, like you say, you might just be starting out in your musical journey and haven't even thought about publicity or PR or anything like that yet. But further down the line, if you happen to end up working with an external publicist, then they're going to need information from you to be able to make the campaign work to the best it can be. So and that the only way that can happen is by what you can bring to it as well. So actually, going through this process, like I say, it's a bit of a brain dump, but it is amazing. Like, I do this as workshops sometimes and get people to talk to each other about what the music they're making, and actually it's amazing where the conversations go. And artists will say to me, "God, I didn't even realize that about myself." But you almost need sometimes someone else to take you out of your own head to kind of see the full picture. And if you feel a bit like anxious about talking to a friend about it or anything like that, then you could even pick up a music magazine, read the sort of questions that journalists ask, and answer them yourself as if you were being interviewed. There's ways of, like, when I sit down with an artist and write their biographies, the process begins with me sitting down with them, having a conversation, and really getting to the root of what it is about either that release or their music generally that they really want to get across. And that only comes about by me asking lots and lots and lots of questions. We throw everything down on a piece of paper and we find what it is that they really want to be talking about. And that is the thing that will make you stand out and people will remember. Like I say, you just want people, you want to be noticed. You want people to pull your sort of record off the shelf and listen to it more so than any of the others that are sitting there. So yeah, that's a really long, the first one is, that's always a really long tip, but I will move on to the next one. Another way of getting your USP across is use your 6 W's, I say. And if you go back to when you're at school in English lessons, they'd always say, if you're writing a story, you need to talk about your who, what, where, when, why, and how. And it's like, if you can do all of that, then essentially you are explaining yourself properly. You know, you're getting to the details. And I'd say that every biography should do all of those things. They might look a little bit different, but at the end of it, you'll find each of those things in there. So that's another way of being able to pull out. So you might talk about like what you do, but actually you might be forgetting to talk about why you do it. And why you do it, again, like I say, will be your unique selling point, will be the thing that marks you out as being completely different jazz musician to a different jazz musician, for example. So moving on to, remember the 3 categories, we'll go to style now. So the style, I think this is like the fun bit and the exciting bit. So it's kind of where you make everything sound, it's very creative. You use language to kind of get your point across, really. And you can kind of tap into fun narratives to create a bit of a world around what you're doing. So that basically means that, so tip number 3, I would say, be more Bowie, color your world, which sounds a bit fancy, but like I say, this is a style section, so we're going to be a bit creative with it. Basically what I mean here is that what you want is the reader to completely fall into the world that you're creating with your music. So David Bowie, I'll use him as an example because everybody knows who he is. But he was very good at doing this with every record. He had a real identity around what he was doing. So, or a style. So you had like Ziggy Stardust or the Thin White Duke. Each record kind of had a bit of an atmosphere around it. So as well as all your content, you've kind of filtered through and decided what you do want in and what you don't in the earlier stage. This is the bit where you can kind of talk about what your world looks like. So I always say that if you've got people that you work with, like they're your inhabitants of the world, you know, that you are creating. You have like describe what it actually looks like and what it sounds like and what it smells like, you know. Often I speak to our artists to talk about where they write their music. So we might go into their rehearsal space and bring the reader into their rehearsal space, and that instantly makes the artist stand out more because nobody else could be in that world, you know. It's so like I say, you can just be a bit more, it's more being more fun and more playful. One way that a lot of biographies and press releases do this is by bringing in a nice quote. So this quote here is, I don't know, I'll just read it out. Oh, Silly Me is a song about worry, written when worried, that might hopefully ease some worry for other worriers. Hope you enjoy it, no worries if not. I just quite like this because it shows a sense of, the artist has a sense of humor. It obviously tells you a little bit about what the song's about, but in terms of it, just reading it, you get a sense of what that song or that what's kind of being intended with that message, without kind of being, Boy Azooga has a sense of humor, It's actually just comes across through the quote. So one way that you might want to make something a bit more personable or interesting is add a quote in there. And the reason I use this one is because I remember when this song was released, I was listening to different radio stations and it kept coming on, and DJs would always read out the quote, and they'd never say anything else about the press release, or like the fact that Boy Azouga's from Wales, or any, you know, or any of those kind of little facts that we were talking about before. They're using this kind of unique, interesting angle, and then they've just, it's there, it's a ready-made quote, ready-made for the DJ to read out on the radio. So it's quite a nice way of getting to something that's a little bit more interesting. It's kind of snappy. Tip 4, again, like language. It's about basically creating the best way to describe the music you're making. So it's trying to be a bit more interesting with what you write. So if you say like you're making music that you think sounds quite dark, that's okay, but it's not particularly interesting. But if you say it's murderous, it adds a more sort of sinister tone. And so instantly, just by changing the way that you say something, it can again create a bit of an atmosphere for this world, this Bowie world that I was talking about before. You can kind of you know that it's a more menacing environment than just saying it's a dark sounding record. You know, it's just a bit lazy. It's like you put so much time and effort into your music, you may as well put that same sort of effort into your writing, because you're not going to do that music any justice if you don't deliver it in the way that I say that it comes across. And sometimes artists say to me, oh, I don't want to reveal too much about me in a biog. It's like, I want to be mysterious, and you know, that's fine as well, but using language is a really good way that you could be mysterious. You don't have to reveal everything about yourself, but by changing the sorts of words that you use, you can create this atmosphere, and without focusing too much on the details that you were worried about giving away about yourself. So it's quite a nice little sort of tactic for that. And like I say, it's a really, and the other fun thing is to draw narratives within worlds or things you're inspired by. So I worked with an artist with a band who were really inspired by Edgar Wright films and comic books, and so it's all this kind of quirky kind of, I don't know, basically I painted them as like superheroes. So when I throughout the narrative, I basically looked at Edgar Wright film scripts, and I was trying to bring through phrases and things from that to try and create this world of them being superheroes, rather than just saying they're a band from 3 different places, which is what they were saying up to that point. So yeah, they thought their angle was that they were from different countries, but actually it was more the fact that they were drawing their own comic books and doing all this kind of really fun stuff. So yeah, that's what I say. You can play with it and have fun, and that's when the excitement comes across, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to write about something in a really exciting, engaging way, why should your reader be excited about it? Do you know what I mean? It's like if you're just listing a load of facts, you know, that's useful, but it doesn't get a clutch at the heartstrings. It doesn't get you really emotionally involved, which is what a really well-written biography should do, really. And then lastly, structure. Like I said, this is obviously how it all fits together, but in terms of your purpose as well, which is really important with this part. So when I'm structuring a biography, I usually start with my USP. So right at the beginning, when we had that big brain dump on a piece of paper with like hundreds of things that you wanted to mention, there was one thing that really stood out. What is that one thing? Start with that. There is no time. People have got very short attention spans. They're busy. They don't have a lot of time to sit and read a really long biography. So if you've only got them for like 2 seconds or 2 sentences, get that really important, exciting, interesting thing at the beginning. There's no time for messing around. So generally, this is how I structure my biographies when I write them. So I'll start with the USP first, which, like I say, gets straight to the message. And I think of it a bit like a diamond. So you start with the point at the top, and it gradually you build on the information as you come further down the press release or biography. But then you want to kind of tie it up, closing it up at the end with like a little wraparound thought. So you might want to refer back to what you mentioned at the beginning, which, like, the book ending it with a similar kind of theme at the beginning and the end, I think is quite neat. But obviously you need to get the story right, because otherwise people won't read to the end anyway. So get all your important stuff first, and then those facts, like if you want to get in those genres that you relate to and or where you're from and stuff, that's fine, but bring them in further down, because they're the bits that are more just like finer details really to your story. They're not who you are. So get yourself first and then broaden it out as you further go further down. And with that in mind, I say make the middle your start. So there's nothing saying that basically the start of your biography has to be the start of your life. So when I was talking about your CV, going from the beginning to the end chronologically, that's fine if it's relevant. But it might be that the most interesting thing, for example, you're pushing a record that you wrote that started in a tattoo parlor. Why don't you put the reader there in the tattoo parlor with you? There's no point talking about the fact that you're a band that got together at school and then putting the tattoo parlor stuff halfway down the biography, because nobody's going to get to that part, because it's all very general, the bit at the top. So the most interesting place, wherever that might be, slap bang, put your reader right there at the start, and then you can bring in all this other information afterwards. You can talk about the fact you met at school later, that's fine, but that's not going to be the thing that really jumps out and hooks you in, unless you wrote your record at school and it's important to your story. So like I say, with everything there's a bit of flexibility with what you do, but I think the most important thing, and this is tip number 7, this is one why it's got lots of stars around it, the most important thing is always to remember why you're writing it and who is going to be reading it. At the end of the day, if you might be writing a biography because you want to get the attention of a live agent, but you also might be writing it for someone because you want, for like a radio DJ, because you want it to get heard on the radio. So if you're writing something for a live agent, there would be no point talking about necessarily the inspiration behind the latest single, because they're going to just want to know whether you can cut it live or not. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you're writing something for a radio DJ, because you want them to get it played on the radio, don't start talking about your live show, really, unless you've got a tour to promote, because it needs to basically help them do their job at the end of the day. So what I always say is put yourself in the shoes of your reader as well. So obviously this is your opportunity to get across what it is that you want to say and your message. But at the same time, you need to think about what your reader is looking for, how much time they've got. Do they know who you are? You know, you could be preaching to the converted, but on the other hand, you might be wanting to attract a new audience. So some of your facts might require some explanation as well. So it's really tricky when if sometimes you want to do a catch-all and you want to kind of get as many people to listen to your music as possible. But what I do sometimes say is it's important to really, really think about what you want to achieve out of it, because that will stop you from putting way too much information in, getting a bit overwhelmed with what order stuff should go in. If you just think about the main aim and the main purpose of it, then that should help you maybe get better results, because people will see in it, you know, something that what they're looking for, basically. Tip 8, I would say, this is where we do all the tidying, basically. So at this point, you've got your biography written, you've got all the content you want, you've made it all sound lovely and colourful, and you've engaged the reader. It's looking really good. I guarantee you will have written too much. I know, because when I do this, I write, I always have I've always gone way over my my ideal word count and things. And there is no kind of specific length of a biography or a press release that they have to be. Again, like I say, it's for the purpose. So something that is for social media will obviously be a lot shorter than maybe an artist profile on your website. It's just how long you think the reader's going to hang around for and all that kind of thing. But so what I always try and do is shave off at least 100 words, because a lot of the time you can say in 5 what you've said in 10. Sometimes you repeat yourself, not just, so if you're if you're an indie band, you might say the word indie 10 times. Is there another way that you can kind of say it so you're not repeating the words that you use? Repetition in meaning. Sometimes you say exact same thing, paragraphs apart, but you've just said it in a different way. You have to be quite ruthless and take things out. And there are a lot of little tactics that you can use. So when I've got my biography and I'm happy with it, I'll look for the word that. I'll use find, and often if you take the word that out of a sentence, the sentence still makes sense and it's exactly the same. So and that works with the word and as well. You can put a full stop and start, so you can save words here and there. And again, by making things more concise, it makes it more easier for the reader to kind of absorb. It gets to the point quicker. And yeah, there's lots of like little sort of things that you can do basically to kind of make sure that it's tight and to the point. But essentially every word in a biography should add value. So don't kind of talk around something like I'm doing now unnecessarily. Just get straight to the point. And we're nearly at the end now. So yeah, step 9, once you've done all that tidying, tweaked up, I would step away from the copy, get away, get some distance. Like any sort of relationship with anything that's going, by this point you'll have probably done like 10 drafts, thrown them out the window, all that kind of thing. I try not to send a biography to an artist that I've written on the day that I've finished writing it, because guaranteed after sleeping on it and coming back to it fresh the next day, there's always something I want to change. And your brain is very good at filling in the gaps when you've been staring at something for a long time. So yeah, and you miss the words as well. So where there are mistakes, your brain sort of skips past them. Spell check doesn't always bring up everything. You might have like the word Clark, it might need an E on it, but sometimes it might not. There are things like that it won't pick up. But a good night's sleep, when you come back to it fresh, you'll notice them all straight away, any mistakes and tweaks. And it's also a really good opportunity to get someone else to have a look over what you've read. So ask them, is it exciting? Does it actually make sense? Because actually, when your brain's filling in all this information for you, sometimes you forget to explain yourself properly. So it might be that it makes more sense. Someone else might read it and something doesn't make as much sense as it does to you at the time. So get some distance, phone a friend, and then maybe make some final tweaks. And then last of all, like I said earlier on, just absorb everything that you possibly can. So read, like, if you want to be reviewed in music magazines, read loads of different kinds of music magazines, see how different styles of music are written about. Because if you're wanting to be a certain type of artist and you're writing in a way that might not engage with a particular publication that you want to be in or radio station that you want to be played on, then you're not doing yourself any favors. So like, if you find yourself always listening to the same radio station, just change channel one day and just see what else comes across. It's surprising how some things are very similar and people relate to things in the same way, and then there are others instances where things are very different. So just like read everything, all the free zines that you see when you go into venues and stuff, pick them up. Even if you don't read them straight away, they'll sit there until you've got 5 minutes with a brew and you just want to read through them. So yeah, that's everything really. I've flown through it, but I was very conscious that I had 10. So the next thing I've got is a Biogordit, but Kadi, I don't know if you had any questions or if anyone has kind of asked any questions or anything.
Yeah, so I've put it in the comments so people can ask questions, give us feedback, let them know their thoughts throughout the session. I've just checked it. No one's posted anything as yet, although we've still got our listeners, which is nice, our watchers. I was glad that everyone couldn't see me because it only focuses on the person speaking, because I was like a nodding dog throughout throughout the presentation. So many things were just made sense, and actually a task, because sometimes obviously I'm not an artist, but sometimes I have to write a bio or I'm reading bios for other people, and it's not my favorite thing, but actually I feel a bit G'd up to actually even revisit my own right now. So it's so well done for making bio writing sound fun. I loved the when you were talking about the change of words in style, you know, that contrast between dark and murderous. It was like, it's an instant, you're like, oh yeah, that's so different. Like dark's like, yeah, and then but murderous is like, oh my gosh, okay, what's that about?
Yeah, it's that emotive kind of thing, and it's very easy to forget about that when you're really focused on, oh, who am I as an artist, what am I doing, and how do I fit into this world of other artists, and you're just thinking about what you're saying, but actually how you say it is such a different one thing. I saw a good example recently. There's an artist called Mathilde who's on Heavenly Records, and she's a really like stylish and like quite enigmatic performer as well. She's really exciting, and her bio begins with talking about that when she has this black bob that swirls around like a cyclone. That's what it said, and I was like, that's amazing. That it would have been very easy for her to say, for the writer to say, oh, she's a great performer, but where's the fun in that? You know, let's talk about the fact that her clothes sway when she, like, you know, performs on stage, and that she's got loads of energy, and you know, it makes you want to see them, it makes you want to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Got something in the chat. Shall we just take that now before you go into? Okay,
yeah, of course, go for it.
There's one question from Fred. Hi, Fred. How long should an artist bio be in terms of numbers and words?
Yeah, okay. So generally when I'm writing a biog, I have in my head, I picture it as being like, if you've got an artist website, on the About Me page, and there it is. And generally I say about 800 words. And the reason I say that is it fits on one page of A4 at around 12 point kind of thing. So 800 is a good benchmark. I think anything that goes over a page of A4, you can definitely lose some information. You know, like I say, it's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but also thinking about what works for you. Like when you've read something about an artist, like how far have you read down the press release or the bio? You know, you decide within the first, it's like when you go through a job interview, where you decide within the first 2 minutes whether you're going to hire the person or not, because you know, it's just like how you get on with that person and things. And it's the same with when you're writing something, you know, get that attention right at the beginning, and then the rest, it almost doesn't make a difference, is what I'm saying. I think it could be 10 pages, it could be 2 pages, it could be 2 sentences, but unless that first bit is really, really catching, no one's going to read the rest of it anyway. So generally the shorter the better, but sometimes people have a lot more information, and it's different for different artists. Some artists, like I say, are just starting out, so they might have less to say than someone that is 5 records in, you know, so their biog would automatically be a lot longer. I just say really think about what the message is that you really want to get across, and focus on that, and then bring in any extra details. But I always say as well that it's really important not just what you put in there, but also what you leave out. So for example, if you're creating, we'll move from biography, but if you're creating a press release, like an announcement for a journalist and telling them about a record that's coming out, it'll often be the case that you need to keep going back a few times to check they've listened to it, check they've got it, all that kind of stuff. But if you keep going back with the same information every time, it doesn't give them any reason to come back to you. But if you have withheld some information, then at least when you go back to them again and say, oh, did you get this? You can provide them with something new to tell them, and actually that will suddenly make like the process seem like it's, you know, more's happening in your world, and it just makes things seem a lot more exciting and interesting. So actually, if you've written what you think is something that's too long, just take something out. You can always tell people about it later. You don't have to tell them all in one go. So yeah, I hope that helps, Fred, but thanks for the question.
Yes, we have another question, but I think we should go on to audit and then come back.
Final questions at the end.
Yeah, something. Exactly. So thank you, and your questions will get answered. We'll come back to it. We've had Marcus patiently waiting on mute. So should we get to it? Should we get to it? I'm going to hand back over to Lisa and welcome Marcus too.
So thanks, Marcus, for sitting there patiently listening to me waffle on and sending this in as well.
It's been really informative. It's been really good. It's really good. I've learned so much in that short space of time.
Good stuff. So just for everybody watching, this is what Marcus's biography looks like at the moment. I've just left it there on the stage. I'm not going to read it all out because hopefully you can all read it. But basically, I think Kadir tried to give me a bit of a challenge because it's actually very good. So well done, Marcus. I do really like it. And I was like, oh, how am I going to, you know, what am I going to find that's wrong with this? And, you know, or what not wrong with it. Like I say, there's no right or wrong, but what can be improved.
Yeah.
But I did really, really like it because, you know, that like it has, like I say, something's obviously working for you because actually when you read it, there's a lot of achievements in there, and, you know, things that you've done so much. And it's all really factual, and I can see that journey from, you know, you doing your classical training at the beginning right through to kind of what you're doing now, which is obviously very different. So that's really good. And another thing that biographies and particularly press releases as well, what they do, which I think is really bad, but this hasn't done, is that they tell the journalist what to write or what to think or what to say. So they might say, oh, it's a record that has this lovely flute flourish halfway through, and I always think, well, they can hear that when they listen to it. It doesn't tell them anything that they can't hear in the music. So what I think you've done really well here is you've explained all these kind of brilliant achievements that you've got, but you've not dictated to someone. Basically, you're letting them make their own mind up. You're just presenting the facts as they are, and that's brilliant because they can do that. And lengthwise as well, it's a really good length. I think it's about 350 words, which is perfect for something like Spotify, Bandcamp. It would be great on, and it would sit really well on your like website as well. So I think in terms of that's great. I think if I was going to really do something to improve it, I think I'd love to know more about your story, Marcus, like who you are as an artist. So a lot of the facts that you've put in there are like who you've supported, like the fact that you've got records out, all that. But I kind of want to know what drives you, like what inspires you musically, like you know. So what I'll do, think about the content, but I'd also think a little bit about structure as well, because I feel like you need to read the whole thing to get a sense of who you are as an artist, rather than getting it in that first. You remember I was saying about this top bit, get right in there, who you are as an artist today, right here, right now. I feel like that all comes at the end, whereas actually you want people to talk about you now and not you playing clarinet at age 7.
Yeah, God no.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, true.
So what I'll do, I've highlighted, this is going to look a bit scary, but I don't mean it to be, but I've just made a few highlights on notes on here. So it's like a little traffic light system. So basically anything that's in red, I think probably needs a bit of attention. Anything orange, yellow is kind of like, yeah, just use it with caution. And green is like, go for it, I love it, that's brilliant. Okay. There's a lot of red, but it's all kind of the same thing, so don't worry about that. But basically when I was reading this through, the first thing obviously that I came to was like classically trained, and so straight away I thought, oh great, wow, classical musician. Marcus, are you a classical musician?
No, I'm not a classical musician. No, not anymore anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I get what you're trying to say. You're trying to say that you know, that you've been schooled in music, basically. You have that expertise and you understand what, you know, that you've got that kind of traditional training as well as, you know, this kind of more contemporary side as well to what you're doing. So that's great, but obviously if that's not who you are, don't put that as the first thing that people see, because that will be what comes across. And then like clarinet, at 7 years old, again, you need to you could even just say clarinet, classically trained on clarinet. You don't even need to say it 7 years old, because it's not relevant to your story, who you are now, unless it's the fact that, you know, you did something at 7 that you know, it makes it important. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of it's one of those situations where you throw everything in there. And but it, like I say, it's not bad, but it's one of those things. And so I started reading through again, and you've got the ABRSM grades up to grade 8. Again, this is about who's reading it, the people. What's the purpose that are you wanting to be played on like 6 music or 1 extra? That's great, but you probably don't. Have you ever heard them talking about who's got grade 8 clarinet?
No.
Exam board kind of music. It's like it's more, and this is what I say, it's more kind of CV territory, because you're talking about what you did at school, and if that's important to you, that's brilliant, but bring it further down. So that's why I say talk about your structure a little bit more. So I'll kind of skip to the first green bit, because I was reading it and I was like, this is great. Yeah, it's like, you know, this is someone that clearly understands music and how to compose and perform. It's great. But then the first wow moment I got was that you studied jazz in New Orleans. But because I'd read about the Leicestershire Arts County, I was like, so this is someone from Leicestershire that's gone and done jazz in New Orleans. What the flip? You know, that's like, what's going on there? That's your story. That's like,
let's speak about that more, don't I?
If you think about it, when we're all at 7 years old at school, everybody like everyone did like musical instruments. That could be anyone, but there's probably not many people from Leicestershire who would have gone on to study jazz in New Orleans. So I want to know what that was like, who you met, what you did there, like, you know, how did that come about? I mean, it might not be something you want to talk about, in which case you just don't put it in there. I'm assuming because it's in there, it's something that you think it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Yeah,
amazing. So let's talk about that, because you could even say something like, what did I write down? Something like bringing a flavor. This sounds a bit rubbish, but bringing a flavor of New Orleans to Leicestershire, and you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
sounds a bit more hooky than so definitely expand on that, I would. And this whole, and the fact that you're this and like musician and a spoken word artist at the same time as well, that's like an interesting mix. Like some people say they're one or the other, but the fact that you're doing both, I think that's really interesting. So talk a bit about that. I guess that relates to your debut EP, Real Talk, like the title. So maybe you talk a bit about the titles of the albums and the EPs and the influences, what sort of like what the concepts or themes are of the records, or those are the things that can't be applied to any other artist because they're completely about you, who you are. But like I say, all these other kind of little bits about what you did at school, and are just kind of extras, really. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then in terms of, and actually, if you're going to expand on that story, then you start thinking, oh God, I'm adding to the word count. But there's a few areas where I would call kind of wasted words a little bit. So where the red bit where I put too many achievements, leading to many achievements, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
You've already listed your achievements afterwards, so I wouldn't even say that. Do you know what I mean? You can kind of, because you're saying, what's to say, this artist has led to many achievements, both personally and professionally. Marcus has performed alongside international.
And I list all of them.
Pardon?
Yeah. And then I list all of them after I say that,
Yeah, you get straight into it, so you don't really need to say that. But the thing is, this is what I'm talking about, like sometimes having somebody else to read what you've written, you would never notice that because you were in the zone as you're writing. So I kind of just tighten things up there and stuff. And then going to some of these yellow ones, like Leicestershire Arts Council. I like the fact that what you did here, you didn't just say I'm from Leicestershire, which I don't know if that's true or not, but you've kind of fed it into something else. So I thought that was really good and well done. But things like dates, you need to be quite careful of, because if you're talking about who you are as an artist now, sometimes putting a date in can date who you are as being relevant. Yeah. So if you're talking about something you did 10 years ago, it might not, you know what I mean? It's like, is it even necessary? Do you even need it in there, really? Yeah. You know, it's kind of, it's like, you know, when you are doing a CV for a job, people always say, don't put everything in, just put your last 2 or 3 jobs in, because that's all people need to know. Similar kind of thing. And just with like the artists as well, I talk about like the people that you've mentioned that you've supported, again, thinking a little bit about who you're writing it for and who your audience is and your reader. If you want to be played on Six Music, Oscar Jerome, yeah, great, I've heard of him, I listen to Six Music all the time, and I have heard of Angie Brown. But the other We Out Here, Love Supreme, festivals. So do you know what I mean? It depends on who's reading it, what references you actually use, depending on how you want to come across as an artist. So it kind of, going back further down, things like contemporary music, again, it's a bit of a woolly word, you know, it can mean anything. Be really specific about who you're kind of, about what you mean with that. And yeah, the release date, February. I'm dotting all over the place now a little bit, but I'm trying not to pick holes in it, because no,
this is like really helpful to me. I'm like, oh wow, yeah.
But yeah, you don't, I think it's just, it needs to be more about you know, who you are as a performer. And I'm interested to know a bit about like the fact that you're in a band as well, and like it sounds like you're almost, this is presenting you as like a solo artist as well, away from the band. Or how important, or is it you as, you know what I mean, or is this more about the band? Or I don't know, it's like,
yeah, it's kind of weird, it's sort of like merged all into one. It's like a mush.
yeah, which, like I say, sometimes, which is where the structure comes in, really. It's like you can include all of this, but it's just putting so it flows very chronologically. Like I say, it starts at you at 7 and it ends in last year, this commission that you did. And actually, let's talk about that commission first, because that's the most relevant thing to you right now. Unless you don't want to and you want to talk about something else, then that's fine. But you know, it's kind of, I just think there's more story to you as an artist that you could really bring through, just by delving a little bit into kind of like, I really want to know about New Orleans. It sounds ace. But yeah, it's that kind of, I'll show you, in fact, what I'll do, I'll show you, I found there's this band. I'll change the slide now. There's this band called Preservation Hall Jazz Band. They're on Sub Pop. I've actually not listened to your music, Marcus, because I am going to after this today. But I wanted to read your biog in the way that somebody would if they were coming across it for the first time. So, but actually it made me think of this band. They're on Sub Pop in America, and it sounds like a similar kind of story, but you can see how it's written quite differently.
Yeah, I see the quote. I love the quote style that you said before, and I'd love to have that in my own thing.
Well, it's great because people hear your voice, do you know what I mean, rather than it being too kind of corporate-y, like Marcus did this, then did this, then did this. It's kind of, you can bring your words into it the way you would describe something or say something. You might like some people, I don't really use the word sick, but sometimes people say, oh, it's really sick how this sounds, and but actually including the language that people use, it gives personality. And at the end of the day, human interest is what people relate to, what people find engaging. So yeah, like this one, it starts, they've been to Cuba and it was like a documentary that came out, but they started straight away with a quote, and it's like, oh, straight away it looks a little bit different, it's interesting. And you'll notice it says the pilgrimage, they took a pilgrimage to Cuba basically, which was in 2015, but they've not spoken about how the group got together or how the group formed, because it's not relevant to their story. What's relevant to their story is the fact that they did this kind of journey to the origins of this music that they loved. And actually I like the way they didn't even just say the band went to Cuba. It was like they started with a prayer position. What's this all about? It makes it interesting. And even referring here to it being a pilgrimage, like that's a more interesting way of saying it's than a journey, so this is sort of stylistic stuff, but it's like thinking about what your message is, and a creative way of, like, you're a creative person, you're a musician, it's like creatively kind of getting your story across and making it really, really personal that can't apply to anyone else. But yeah, but like I say, check, I think it's actually quite a good thing to look at other people's blogs and see what they've written. So a lot of record labels websites, if you look at their artist page, I would recommend Sub Pop actually. They have a real mix of different genres. And their in-house press team are like, they write really, really, really well. So there's some really good examples on there, so I would check those out. Same with Heavenly Records as well. They've a really good artist website, artist pages, sorry. And I would check those out too. But yeah, I am going to stop talking now. I realise that I've been talking for quite a long time. So.
That's great. Thanks so
I'm going
much.
to put it back to you, Marcus, like if there's anything else you want to know. But thanks so much. I really appreciate you sharing it though, because it is a very personal thing to do. So thanks for that. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to hearing the music.
Yes.
Most importantly.
Oh, thank you. That was so good. I was smiling and laughing throughout that session. I should start by saying at 7, I played the recorder. So that is going in my bio. You're not going to convince me not to do that now, Lisa. I had a question. So you asked Marcus about what inspires you, or
I'll just stop sharing my screen for now.
Yeah, good idea.
Just keep it a bit more interesting. There we go.
Yeah. So you asked Marcus about what inspired him, and say he works through that, asks some questions, does that. So would you say ideally that then goes at the top of the bio? That's like the top of the diamond.
Yeah, I'd say it really is about what you want to be talking about. At the end of the day, what you put in your biography is, you're the one that's going to have to justify it for however long it's up on your website for, or however long your publicist is using it for. You're the one that's going to be answerable to what's in it. So if there's something, like, you get artists that go, oh, I'm sick of hearing, like, why do people always ask me about that? I don't want to, like diva artists, people sometimes say, oh, I don't like questions about where I'm from. It's like, well, don't put that in your biog then. Do you know what I mean? So only put, this is what, so yeah, I was saying about inspiration and influences and things like that. Yeah, you put that at the top, but if that's what you want to talk about, or if it's what, if it's the most interesting thing about you as well, like it's, there might be something that's more interesting. It might not be an influence. It might be the fact that, like I say, I always say, use as an example, but that you make your own instruments. That might be the key thing that marks you out as being a little bit different, or that you know, you I'm trying to think now off the top of my head. I always say it's like,
I think whatever your unique bit is
yeah,
what you're
it's like
saying.
using
it might be what inspires you, but it might be something else you do.
Yeah, totally, like using a non-musical example. If we're talking about like USPs and things, I always say it's a bit like, you know, I could say I love food, but who doesn't love food? That's like everybody. But I could say instead, I could say I really enjoy making fish tacos with spicy sauce that tickles my nose. You know, I could say something like that, and then instantly that puts the reader in either in my kitchen or in Mexico where I'm eating tacos, or, you know, it that rather than just saying I like food, it's like doesn't tell you anything, you know. So it's really hard. It like I say, a biography, don't think of it as a biography, think of it as a story. It's like what drives you, why you do what you do. Go back to those 6 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and how. It's like, it's easy to say what you do and where you do it, but how do you do it? Like I had an artist say to me the other day, actually, I really want to say that I blend genres, but I don't want to sound cliche. How do I do that? And I said, well, I wouldn't, it's really hard, because then you start talking about genres which are quite general, but actually the way to do it is to talk about your process. So like maybe the rehearsal space, like how you create a song, like you were in a band, talk about who writes what, like automatically through telling that story, it will, and like the influences that you all have differently as a group, that will show that sort of, it's like showing, not telling. Do you know what I mean? It demonstrates how you blend all these genres rather than saying we blend genres. You know, it's kind of just being, like I say, devil's in the detail. Be really descriptive and paint that picture in someone's head, so that as soon as they're reading it, they know what it is, what it is that you're trying to say to them. It's just like making a little bit of extra effort, really. But yeah,
I was thinking with Marcus's one, and this might just be my mind going too far because that's me, but like that his could have a bit more influence of spoken word, like in its style, maybe, if that's something that is a big influence. Or yeah, because then you can say it, but then you don't have to say it, because as people read it, it's like if you add it to the style.
Yeah, like if you're talking about spoken word, then bring in like those quotes, like you said yourself, Marcus, that you like the quote kind of thing. Like it's sometimes it's just, you can say the exact same thing, but stick it in quote marks, it suddenly lifts off a page, and like I say, it makes it a bit snappier, make things easy for the person to read it as well. So breaking up long bits of text with quotes, sometimes if someone's skimming something really quickly or on a really tight deadline and they just need some words to like fill their column inches, like it's a bit easier to do that when you've just got a ready-made quote there. So yeah, as a spoken word artist, like you could really talk about that. But also as a spoken word artist, I imagine, do you read, or like do you,
how do you mean? Sorry.
Like are you into poetry or
stories?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe if there's like any particular poets or that you're really inspired by, or books that you've read that kind of inspired what you do, because like a lot of people say, oh we like this artist and this artist and this artist, but I always say that if you're going to do that, that's fine, but just maybe say what it is about them that you like, because that again shows a little, or if you want to, it just makes it more clear, defined of who you are as a person. So
loved it. I really enjoyed that session. I especially enjoyed the audit. I hope it wasn't too
useful.
uncomfortable.
It was really useful. It was really helpful. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
That was the right thing to say, Marcus. Thank you.
We'll talk about it after. No, it's fine. So before we wrap up here, we have one more question from the live, which was, how often should a biography be updated?
I think, I don't know, how long is a piece of string? It's really when there's something new to tell, really. It's, you know, sometimes you can do a whole rework of something if you change your mind about how something's coming across, but it might be that you just want to add something new in that you've, like, for example, with Marcus's biography, the last thing on there was about the commissioned project, was it? That you did. So maybe that was something that kind of, maybe the rest of it was already written, but you wanted to, you've added that on at the end. See, I see what you did there. But that's the point. You might just want to add something on, but you might want to rework it slightly by bringing it more into the rest of the story, or that might change the whole angle of everything. So I'd say you can have a general one, but it might be that if you've got an album release coming up, maybe you actually don't really want to talk about a lot of what's in there. Maybe you want to focus solely on what that album is about. And that could be a biog. So I mean, and then that's when people get a bit confused about what's a biog and what's a press release, because you're describing the album and everything. But if that is in itself a story of its own, that can still be your biography, and it can be very current for what you're doing. But like I say, it doesn't need things in like release dates, because it will give it more longevity if you don't make it so timely. But yeah, I mean, I'd only refresh it whenever it needs something doing to it. So yeah, it's not like every year you must do a new biog or anything like that. You might want to change it between campaigns. You might want to just do it when there's something new. But
makes sense.
Good question though.
Yeah,
I've never had that one.
That was another one from Fred. He's helping us.
He's on it.
He's
excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, Fred. Big up, Fred.
Yeah. Okay, I really enjoyed that session. I really hope that both of you enjoyed being part of it too, and that everybody listening and watching is. I'm going to make sure I speak with Lisa and get the links to some of the places that you mentioned to have a look at the sites, the Heavenly, and I'll drop those in the description as well. They'll be in the bio for this video. Like I said, I'll drop links to Marcus's music so we can all have a listen. Now he's seen the bio. I've already read it, but everyone else. And I think that's it with all the questions. Like I said, so what will happen is mostly people will be watching this on the replay, so when it's all updated, like I said, all the links will be there. I just want to thank you both again. Really appreciate it. And like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this session. My favorite kind of session where I can just sit back and watch everyone else. I want to do that
so much.
I'm going to do that all the time. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much, Marcus.
Pleasure.
And thank you, everyone, for joining the live. Oh, that's great. No comment. Just thanking you guys and saying that they've learned a lot in the comments, which is great. They're not hating us, guys. They're loving us.
It's always good to know.
Okay, I'll end this now. So thanks again to everybody, and I hope to see you all soon.
Nice one. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.